Fans of Warhammer 40,000, grimdark storytelling, and the incorruptible being corrupted. Thank you very much for joining me for an opinion video on a recently posted story over at the Warhammer community website. So, what is this story and why am I talking about it? So, the story in question is called Psychic Awakening Consequences, and I will leave a link in the description and maybe even a pinned comment so you can go check this story out if you're interested in reading it. The story is set in M42 Warhammer 40,000 world, so it's not a Horus Heresy story, which is what I normally talk about, but no, I'm putting one of my feet, like an unexpected warp incursion, into the 42nd millennium again. So yes, here I am. The reason I'm making this video and talking about Psychic Awakening Consequences is because it's really interesting. And I feel it addresses one of the principal beefs with the Primaris Marines and some of the tone of the 8th edition lore. And about 3 years ago, I made a video which I called Grimdark Deadend. And in that, I basically talked about how GW had sort of was struggling to find a way how to write itself out of the grimdark universe it made. And they'd moved away from some of the core notions of the universe to allow the Primaris and the story of the 8th to happen. Psychic Awakening, I think, addresses some of this, and that's why it's really interesting, to me at least. So this is going to be completely spoiler-ridden, so if you've not already read it, and you don't want me to spoil the ending for you, go read it now, as I will be giving everything away, I think. However, that said, it's not a particularly long story. It's only a short piece, reminiscent of some of the old stories we used to get in White Dwarf, so yeah, no big reading task for most of us, I would have thought. That's the overview. What am I going to do in this video? Well, I'm going to break it down as follows. I'm going to give you an overview of the story, and then going to make some observations on the events therein. I'm then going to give some analysis of those observations and finally wrap it up with a closing thought or two, or maybe even 3 if I come up with something in the meantime. That's the plan. So the story, Psychic Awakening, broadly speaking, it is about a group of Primaris Grey Shields, 2 companies worth, being delivered to a Cassadeur, which is a newly adopted homeworld of the Brazen Drakes. The Brazen Drakes are a newly created chapter by the official GW writing team, so they didn't exist prior to this story, and we really don't know much of them. The story opens on the bridge of the Lux Imperatus with the supervising custodian shield captain Tyvar receiving a message from the Ordo Hereticus, which has declared the entire Brazen Drake chapter as Hereticus Diabolus Extremis, which to me sounds like a pretty serious heresy slap in the world of 40k. And basically the shield captain, Tyvar, then orders a Primaris to stand down and be arrested and await their fate. This doesn't go down too well with the leader of the Primaris who is present in the story, a certain Captain Geryon. And yes, he doesn't like the fact that he's been arrested, in effect, on charges of serious heresy by the shield captain. And there's also a Sister of Silence, a senior Sister of Silence, and a number of her sisters are present in the story. The story is very much written from her perspective, as like an observer, shall we say. Quite interesting. I like how they'd structured that. The Primaris Captain Geryon then goes on to show his highest loyalty is not to the Imperium, as the custodian is clearly suggesting it should be, but to his battle brothers in the Brazen Drakes. Tension mounts. And then one of the Grey Shields, one of the Grey Shield Primaris, protests verbally against Tyvar's order. And Tyvar then proceeds to, with absolute zero warning, ceremony, or chance to respond, to blow this Primaris Marine into meaty chunks with his Guardian Spear-mounted bolt weapon. At this point, the Grey Shields and Captain Geryon, rather than submitting, proceed to attack. There is a bloodbath. Many people are killed. Geryon is killed. Bridge crew are killed. Before Geryon dies and during the fight, he issues a Vox order via his supersized Gorget to the entire Primaris contingent on the fleet to seize control of the vessels and that they had been betrayed. So yes, it's a very brief story. It puts you straight in there, and it is this moment of tension at which Tyvar has this order revealed to him. You could criticise the setting a bit, because how would Tyvar receive such an order in a public place as a bridge of this, the Lux Imperatus, in full view of everybody? Clearly, that's a risky thing to do. I give the writer the benefit of the doubt. I imagine it's a moment of extreme concern and great worry by the Order Hereticus. We don't know, we aren't indicated as to why the Brazen Drakes have been declared Hereticus, Diabolus, Extremis. So it's a short story, but that doesn't really matter, and I'm going to get into that. So those are the events. Custodian Shield Captain, basically the Hand of the Emperor, receives orders from the Inquisition, another Hand of the Emperor, to apprehend a group of Primaris Marines as being heretics. The Primaris Marines refuse, it escalates, and the Primaris fight back. So there you go, a simple summary of the story. We also get to see the Sisters of Silence doing their stuff and taking Primaris Space Marine names. Right, that's what's happened. So what are my observations on the story? Well, firstly, Tyvar shot first. However, it doesn't mean he's wrong. I mean, as a matter of fact, just like Han Solo, Tyvar was right to shoot first. Next observation on the story. Well, I mentioned this already, but we'll restate it here because it's key. The Brazen Drakes are a new chapter that had not previously been mentioned in the lore. So we could call them a plot device, or perhaps, and I'm hoping this is the case, are going to be something new and exciting that will be explored in the Psychic Awakening part of the 40K storyline. Another observation, Primaris Marines demonstrated allegiance to their chapter before the Imperium. Given Tyvar's authority, a Custodian Shield Captain, Geryon should have immediately surrendered himself and his Grey Shields. However, he didn't. He resisted. One of his men openly resisted. So when Tyvar responded with lethal force, the Primaris responded in kind, as opposed to maybe sort of turning it down a notch. And my final observation is that Geryon showed, at the very best, grotesque hubris, and at worst was clearly a heretic to the Imperium, as the Ordo Hereticus had alleged. Whichever way you cut it, Geryon was completely in the wrong. He received an order from a Custodian Shield Captain, and he should have obeyed. He had no authority to resist. Even when Tyvar gunned one of his men down, Geryon still had no right to respond in the way he did. So Geryon is in the wrong. Was it because his pride and hubris got the better of him? We don't know. Or was it because he's a dirty, filthy traitor? We also don't know. Analysis. Let's move on to thinking about what all this means. So first and foremost, and the bit that I particularly like with what I referred to at the start with Primaris Marines, is Primaris Space Marines can turn traitor to the Imperium of mankind. And not just in a minor way either. As I said in this story, they directly defy the order of the Adeptus Custodes and the Inquisition with lethal force. In terms of thinking about plot symbolisms and in-universe suspense of disbelief, it's a very strong symbolism that the author has used here, because the order comes from a custodian and it also comes from the Inquisition, who are one of the highest authorities in enforcing the Emperor's will, and certainly they are senior to any Astartes of any rank, and even, I would argue, a Primarch. Second point of analysis. So I think this very strong symbolism of Geryon being ordered by and then defying the orders of the Imperium, it has been invoked by the author to underline the malign intent of Geryon and his fellow Primaris Marines. Second point of analysis. We can have no sympathy with Geryon and his Primaris brothers' behaviour. Clearly, as I've said, he should have acceded to the authority of the Custodian and the Inquisition. Without going into lots of examples, here's a nice vivid one that a lot of us will know. Contrast Geryon's reaction to that of Captain Titus at the end of the Space Marine computer game. Titus, who had been through quite the experience in defeating the Chaos Incursion, was confronted by an Inquisitor and arrested on suspicion of being exposed to the warp. Did Captain Titus lose it, defy the Inquisitor, resist, start shooting? No. He recognised the authority of the Inquisitor. So, an interesting contrast there to Geryon's behaviour. Another point on analysis. So, here we have an open act of defiance with lethal force by a group of Primaris Marines against the orders of agents of the Imperium they are subservient to. That begs a question. What has caused their allegiance to be corrupted? And who has caused it to be corrupted? Alternatively, is this story representing a terrible mistake on the part of the Inquisition by declaring the brazen drakes as being hereticus diabolus extremis? We don't know. It could be an honest reaction, but if so, well, why did Geryon act the way he did, even given the circumstances of Tyvar's attack on one of his men? Or was it a moment of realising his cover and his brother's cover had been blown, and whatever plan of rebellion, traitory, or heresy they had was about to be exposed, so they had to act to maintain that plan? We don't know. However we cut it, his reaction was unforgivable in the eyes of the Imperium. Final point of analysis. Lore-wise so far, it has been stated that Primaris Marines are more resilient to corruption than Firstborn Astartes, or the classic Adeptus Astartes. However, that does not imply they are immune to the touch of chaos and corruption. That was a door that was left open early in the 8th edition lore, and it is a possibility that Primaris Marines rebel against the Imperium, go renegade, or even fall to chaos. And this story, Consequences, seems to be an opening of that door and a beginning of the exploration of the darker side of the Primaris Marines. And I like that. That concludes the analysis part of this video, and I'll now move on to a closing thought. Something to leave you with to consider. So, as I said at the start, 3 years ago I made a video criticising the transition, let's say, of 7th to 8th edition and the Primaris lore for being inconsistent with the grimdark narrative of the 40k universe. 30 years of grimdark writing. This story seems to be a first step in redressing that mismatch. I certainly welcome it as a bold narrative move and believe the 40k lore, and by extension the game, will be enhanced by a story exploring how Primaris Marines can turn against the Imperium. What we don't know yet is, will it be chaos or perhaps a threat from within that is their puppet master? We don't know. But what I do think is, I think it is a very interesting step in the storytelling of 8th edition 40k. And I, for one, hope that we see a lot more exploration of this idea. And a final closing thought, you'll have noticed the image I used in the background for part of this video, which was the art from the very, very start, the Dark Imperium artwork. And I kind of feel it's a time to remind ourselves of that artwork and think about the symbolism that was there from the word go with Primaris Marines. Half of this Primaris helmet is clean, pure, uncorrupted, in service of the Imperium. The other half is clearly tainted, and tainted by chaos. So the implication that Primaris could succumb to the temptations of the warp has been there in the visuals since the very beginning of 8th edition, and by extension the Primaris Marines, and now are we beginning to see that explored. So those are my thoughts about this story, Psychic Awakening Consequences. I hope you found this an interesting and thought-provoking video. As always, I'd like to hear what you think about it. Please do leave your polite comments and suggestions. And I'm very interested to see how everybody perceives this shift in the storytelling and how we may now have the opportunity, both in terms of the stories, but also the tabletop gaming of having Renegade or even Chaos Primaris Marines. Would that be interesting? If you enjoy content like this and you would like to support me in what I do on this channel, you can do so via Patreon, and there is a link in the description, and you can see my Patreon account details now on screen. Any support you can offer really will be appreciated. Thank you very much. But other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.